Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and broadcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX, along with BDEX's founder and CEO himself, David Finkelstein. What's new, David?
Hey, Jesse. I'm doing well. I don't know what's new. Staying busy for sure, and looking forward to another episode of Deconstructing Data with a great guest we have coming.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to him. We've already had a good discussion pre-show. So today we're thrilled to welcome on Pat LaCroix. He is EVP of Strategic Partnerships at Seekr Technologies, or just Seekr. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. We're great. We're really happy to have you on the show today. And we'd love to have you kick it off. And for our listeners and viewers that aren't familiar with you or the company, it would be great if you could kick us off with a little bit of background on yourself and what led you to join Seekr and what you guys are doing today.
Great. So I've been working in the marketing and advertising world for about 20 years now, working at companies large and small, both on the agency and the brand side. I've held global roles at places like Bose, overseeing a host of different marketing functions all over the world. And I joined Seekr, which is an AI company really focused on evaluating and generating reliable and credible content at scale, and really on a mission to create a much more trustworthy infoscape and web that you can trust through ethical and responsible AI. So, I joined Seekr about 2 years ago, really compelled by the vision and mission of the company that very much holds true today, ever more so than it did even 2 years ago.
Awesome. And that's great. So, and are you wearing Bose headphones today?
Of course, I'll always be a loyal Bose fan. And
that's awesome. I'm a big Bose fan as well. So we're going to jump in. I would love to kind of dive into the first topic, which we called government grade AI software and technologies. Talk to us a little bit about this. I mean, when you're talking about government and AI, I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are on what Seekr is doing in this area.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think to take a step back, government is certainly a category where we're working with and serving on behalf. But use government more in the figurative term here in terms of the capability and the governance of AI. One of the biggest pitfalls of many AI solutions is that they tend to often be generically trained large language models, and they really struggle in tasks that require government grade domain expertise that often produce conflicting results and a lack of trust. Many of these AI companies that you may have heard about, they're mainly built and training on popular data, not verified data, and it really creates questions for business leaders who are responsible for AI and revenue and reputation to really ask hard questions about the AI technologies and models they're considering. Is the data accurate? How is the model trained? Where does the information come from? There's a whole host of issues and problems to first and foremost address when you're thinking about how to use AI, which has amazing capability and potential, but making sure that is it going to be opaque? Are there inaccuracies? Are there hallucinations, errors, bias? How can it kind of leverage data at the enterprise level across many different siloed data sets in terms of how it can drive performance, security, the cost of AI, the scarcity of the data and the expertise, the cost, the time, the resources it would take to pull it all together. So when you think about government grade, it's thinking about it in that kind of figurative sense, like how can we deliver a very trustworthy, transparent and responsible AI like a government has that level of responsibility and transparency to its constituents, and all to deliver in a way that's highly secure, trustworthy, and scalable.
I love that. You make such a good point about the popular data that most AIs are using today.
Mm-hmm.
What seems to be one of the biggest problems with a lot of the AI technologies is that the data that's out there, this so-called popular data that's out there, what they're reading is a lot of it is wrong, right? I mean, there's a lot of data, a lot of bad data out there, right? And so there's misinformation. And so a lot of times you're using an AI tool and it gives you an answer that just doesn't make sense, or it's incorrect and to the point, not trustworthy. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about sort of building an AI tool that is based on trustworthy data, data that is confirmed. Because we've talked about this, you know, on the
We
show
do.
a number
Yeah.
of times. It's like,
Same story, different data.
yeah. It's the same, you know, philosophy, garbage in, garbage out,
Yeah.
applies here. And it's a problem, right?
It absolutely is. I mean, I think it's about, you know, garbage in, garbage out. You know, trusted data, trusted input is going to lead to reliable output, responsible output, particularly when you're working across a bunch of highly regulated, you know, industries. You know, there's a host of safety and compliance requirements that, you know, in order to have a reliable generative AI, you know, output and solution, those have to be accounted for, incorporated, and adhered to throughout, at the very beginning, throughout, in an end-to-end application to the very end.
Mm.
So the other thing, you know, so help us understand a little more about like what you guys are doing at Seekr, because when you're talking about using trusted data, so there's sort of a process here, right? To making sure that you're training the AI on specific data assets that you know are trusted. And so is this specific to each customer, specific to each brand that you work with, or is it specific to an industry? How do you normally do that?
Yeah, it's kind of all of the above. You know, really the key piece is, you know, like I said, we're on a mission to deliver trustworthy AI to help businesses scale in a reliable and credible way, and in the way they use AI. You know, really, we do this by, you know, we deliver an end-to-end tool set, you know, really aim to simplify and demystify the alignment process. You know, you hear the words alignment sometimes in regards to AI, and that's come up of late in regards to some other large, well-known AI companies. But that idea of like aligning to principles and requirements is really kind of key. And what we do is we have a proprietary scoring system, a proprietary web crawler that's really about enabling our ability to evaluate the credibility of content against, you know, predetermined principles and standards. So whether it's, we do a lot of work in the media and advertising world, so kind of understanding how you know, content in media is aligned to, say, like journalistic principles, which we believe is a way to best understand and identify what is objective content, to financial, to healthcare, to government, you know, really aligning upfront, you know, kind of what is the guidelines and the standards that we must train, tune, and deploy our models against. That's really how we can deliver a much more trustworthy AI experience. And then, you know, when you're training on more reliable and accurate data rather than popular data, then you get much more reliable, trusted output. And also you solve for kind of that idea of when you have a principled scoring and rating system, you know, trained against, you know, predetermined industry principles, that's how you're able to remove, you know, error, bias, and hallucinations that, you know, we hear a lot about day in and day out in, you know, the news.
Yeah. So you're talking, you brought up journalism. I'm curious, like, where are we? Like, are we at a point yet where we can use a technology like this to determine the difference between real news and fake news?
Well, I think we're at the place where we can be much more critical thinkers in terms of how we evaluate what's more or less reliable. And absolutely, by using kind of some of these, you know, technologies to better rate, identify, and score content against, you know, predefined principles and standards like journalism. And just to go a little bit deeper into that, how we do that when we're using the journalistic standards to evaluate news, you know, there's a whole host of explainable and very clear, transparent subfactors that go into that methodology. But, like, you know, ways we can do that is identifying clickbait. So, you know, is there a headline that actually connects to the actual subject and the body of the article? Is this subjective? Is there personal attack? Is there sourced reporting? Is there a byline? Is there political bias? All of those factors can really provide a much more, you know, transparent, explainable way to identify what is, higher quality content, more reliable content, and then really allow, folks to kind of understand what's much more trustworthy journalism and reporting.
Sounds like the social media platforms need something like this.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the thesis of the origin story of Seekr goes back to, with, seeing how, major actions in the world and democracy and the economy were being driven by, conversations online and very much kind of the vacuums of how we were all getting our information, be it Cambridge Analytica, Brexit, COVID, elections. The idea, is and was like, hey, there should be a way to rate and evaluate content against reliability and credibility. So again, people can kind of be, have, a much greater sense of trust in the information they're being fed and they're consuming.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good topic. I feel like we could probably go deeper on this one. I know we still have a few more, but were you going to ask something else, David?
No, actually, what I was going to do is because he also, I asked about journalism, but he also mentioned brand alignment. And so that actually segues us.
Okay,
so that's what I was going to
do. Take it away then.
Pat, you mentioned brand alignment. We're on a podcast, so this is a really great conversation for us to have here about podcast sponsorships, which is something that we've been talking about doing. And so, we had a really interesting conversation before the show, and I'd love for you to, dig deeper and share with our listeners a little bit about this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So, I think as I mentioned before, we believe that the best way to evaluate content is really understanding the guiding principles and standards for that content. So, when we were rating and evaluating news for reliability and credibility, the best way to rate that content is through journalistic principles and standards. Those are the guiding principles of, what is quality news and reporting and journalism. Podcasting is a completely different beast. We were talking before we got on the live stream here, right, about, the prevalence of UGC. And user generated content, which podcasting is, it's live, it's often real time, it's highly unpredictable. And the idea is that there needs to be kind of nutrition labels, if you will, to kind of understand what is responsible, reliable content in the form of podcasting. And there's, in terms of kind of brand alignment, there's been kind of this emergence of the brand safety or brand suitability industry over the last half decade or so. And there's some great systems in place, broadly speaking, to kind of help give brands and advertisers and publishers like a high level understanding of what's safe and suitable content. But we believe that there's a lot of the devil's always in the detail, and nuance matters, and particularly when it comes to the spoken word and live human conversation, like to just rate that in a very kind of binary, blunt way, without actually understanding the nuance and subtleties of conversation, we think is a complete misapplication and leads to all sorts of false positives and false negatives when assessing what is kind of the most suitable, contextual, reliable content in podcasting. So what we did was we really think about, okay, what's the best way to evaluate communication and conversation, live spoken word content. We kind of went back to, we talk about rules and principles. So when it comes to podcasting and conversation, there's no better rule than the golden rule, which is, of course, treat one another the way you'd want to be treated yourself, with respect, or said another way, with civility. So we developed an application in the journalism, in the news rating world. We had already been mining for personal attacks. So the idea here in podcasting is by identifying the severity and frequency of personal attacks, i.e. the prevalence or lack thereof of civility. That is, while simple, the most universal and trustworthy way to really identify kind of the safety, the suitability, the alignment with brand values of podcasting conversation. In the podcasts, people can have hard conversations, challenging conversations, sometimes pushing the line conversations. But if they're being civil and respectful to one another, having informed debates, informed articles, attacking, kind of the subject itself rather than the person, that's okay. There's plenty of examples of, other kind of brand safety systems out there that would flag somebody talking about Israel and Hamas or politics or, taking a shot or having a debate. Like those could be triggered words that ultimately, in some other ways would be flagged as being unsafe or unsuitable for brands to advertise in. But that's oftentimes just like the news of the day. And, we believe news is truly a key piece, of creating a much more trustworthy, media landscape and web. And, it's really important that we don't penalize folks for having those conversations, that we do encourage brands to advertise in that type of content. So really kind of rallying around, this idea of measuring for civility and just simply understanding, like, are we having a respectful conversation, and understanding the levels or severity of personal attack, we think completely kind of can open up the market, both for advertisers, publishers, and creators alike, to kind of better understand what's the most appropriate podcast for them to advertise in, for them to monetize around, for them to sell, you name it.
Awesome. What about other types of user-generated content? I mean, I've seen so many brand safety conversations around, YouTube Shorts and TikTok and things like that. I think that there's been brands. I've actually seen screenshots where people are like, "Oh, did this brand really want to advertise over this content or whatever?" How do we get there? How do we avoid? Brands can avoid being associated with other types of content as well.
Yeah, I mean, and you're hitting on a term that I didn't create, but I both love and hate, which is the screenshot industrial complex. And let me tell you, it takes one to know one. So, as I mentioned at the jump, in my past life, I grew up on the ad agency side. I started in media planning and buying. I then went brand side at CVS Health, followed by Bose, where I oversaw global media, amongst other functions. And, I was very much, that, big brand marketer who was very much incentivized and demotivated in a way to, not get the brand in trouble. And avoid that kind of screenshot piece. And the way the screenshot gotcha happens is the tools often being used are way too generic, way too high level, way too much kind of blunt binary instruments. And, what we're trying to do and are doing at Seekr is really judging every piece of content on its own individual merit. We do not put a rating on something that we have not read, listened to, watched, you name it. A lot of other technologies out there, they are very much, generalizing and categorizing content for what is safe and suitable at the highest level. And, as the amount of content that gets generated every single second of every single day seemingly is growing exponentially. You need to be able to deploy trusted, responsible AI at scale to really get, your head and arms wrapped around it all. And we don't know how you can rate and understand what is, reliable, suitable, credible, safe, whatever it is, you name it, without actually, reading, listening to, or watching it on your own. And that's where, trusted, responsible AI like Seekr kind of comes in.
It's a great point, because it's you can't do it all on your own, right?
No, you cannot do this by hand.
Right.
Yeah. But just to build on that, we still believe, human intelligence is what really guides the artificial intelligence. So, when we talk about training and tuning, our models against, predefined expert standards, industry standards, requirements, whatever it might be, you need to have, expert humans kind of advising and guiding some of that input. And then also, there's a technique we call human in the loop. So as we are providing evaluations on whatever data set, whatever type of content, we invite our customers and partners to kind of come into our systems and provide, a kind of a proverbial thumbs up, thumbs down, and some additional commentary to kind of help us better understand, because our mission is to provide the most accurate, transparent systems out there. And part of that mission to achieve accuracy and doing so through transparency is, providing kind of that human feedback that can continue to further inform, our machine learning and models to be, that much more accurate.
That's a great point. Well, I'm glad that there's still that human touch in there.
Absolutely.
So AI hasn't completely replaced humans in this regard.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And it won't.
Yeah, and it won't. I mean, yeah,
Right.
we've said that before too. It's like you need that human interaction in order to train it, right, with the right information. That human loop, as you said as well, because you need to kind of check it, right? So you need to see what your platform's doing, see what the AI is doing, and then decide whether it's working as you intended, and continue to adjust it. But to your point, this is in fact a job that like humans couldn't do anyway, right?
Right.
I mean, there's no way, to your point, like a human can sit there and listen to all the content that's out there and make the determination of in real time whether this
and look,
brand, right?
And we're all fallible. So, humans, if we're trying to do it all by ourselves, like that error, those biases, those hallucinations I talked about before, those would very much come into play. So that's why it's critical in the upfront, in the training, in the setting up of the guardrails and the alignments. That's where, as long as you can set the AI the right way there, then you eliminate and reduce the errors and the bias and the hallucinations.
Yeah.
And this is a step up because humans are imperfect, so we can't catch it all. But AI still needs trained too.
Yeah.
But anything else on this second topic before we move on, just in regard to podcast sponsorship or brand alignment?
No, let's keep it going.
All right. So our third topic is podcast evaluation. So assessing podcasts for brand suitability. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we've been really doing at Seekr when it comes to podcasting, but really even more broadly than podcasting, when it comes to all content evaluation, our product is called Seekr Aligned. And this is really about, providing kind of, contextual AI, helping both brands and publishers, reach the broadest, most suitable audiences and really trying to provide, more trusted, confident reach for advertisers, and then also allowing publishers to expand their revenue potential. And really, what we're doing here is trying to provide kind of one-on-one technology that is patented, provides a whole lot greater level of precision and nuance to understanding kind of every content, every URL, every podcast, every episode on its own merit. And then really, allowing, the sell side publishers the opportunity to kind of sell a longer tail, if you will, of inventory. What we're, trying to solve for here is, kind of educating the market to get away from kind of preconceived notions, preconceived biases, preconceived stereotypes. So in podcasting, we think first and foremost, aligning around that golden rule of civility score is the most trustworthy and universal way to evaluate what is appropriate from a podcasting standpoint. But then I'll be able to go another level down and start to work across whether it's different types of genres or different types of topics, be it news, be it politics, be it comedy, being true crime. And I'm mentioning these categories because these are the ones that often kind of get black boxed and put in the penalty box because on the surface and from afar, stereotypically, a lot of brand marketers and media buyers will say, okay, that's too controversial for me. That's not safe and suitable for me. And the reality is, the vast majority of those podcasts, they are, perfectly safe, perfectly suitable, perfectly civil. And just because they might get like a warning sticker from another system saying like, be careful, they talk about, violent topics, or they're talking about political topics. If you really get at the heart of understanding the conversation, and in our platform, you're able to see every single episode of every single podcast on the platform in real time. And we're able to kind of go into every single transcript and provide snippet by snippet, word by word analysis of the conversation, and say where there are instances of, hey, this was a personal attack, or this was a severe attack, or this was where, there's a high risk for speaking about, sexual content or profanity or whatnot, but kind of bringing, our partners in, and they can kind of see, at that level of detail with that level of transparency. It just provides a whole lot more confidence to kind of be like, okay, we don't need to take machetes to the media buys and just kind of cut, from cut and run from all this programming. There's actually a lot of great programming out there to help, like I said, advertisers expand their reach, and publishers to expand their revenue capabilities. So it's just, a lot of lost reach and revenue on the table. And we really like to think about these tools, not as just like, think of this as a brand safety tool to, kind of, keep you out of hot water, but really think of it more as a, contextual curation tool to help you kind of expand your reach, expand your portfolio, in a confident, reliable, responsible way.
Mm.
Yeah. Have you ever heard any of those sports podcasts? Man, they can get pretty heated.
Yeah, they are. And look, if they're like really going after one another, in terms of, race, orientation, ethnicity, whatever it might be, we're gonna flag them accordingly. And I think, a lot of brands might want to stay away from that. But, if they're just talking about, offense, defense, shooting, whatnot, like as long as it's through the context of the category, which in that case is obviously sports, then good to go.
Very cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm excited about this technology. I think it's, we work in the advertising, marketing space as well, but, obviously in a very different way. But, we've heard a lot of stories and we've seen sort of the frustrations with a lot of advertisers, when it comes to brand safety. And I think this is a technology that's really going to improve that, and help brands, in a number of ways. So I'm excited for it.
Absolutely. And like you said, it helps expand reach because rather than just sort of like canceling all these different places, they're able to kind of see where it's still, maybe they mention those things, but it's still safe to advertise there.
Absolutely. It's a growth driver. It's a reach driver. It's a revenue driver.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
So that was podcast evaluation, assessing podcasts for brand suitability. Anything else you want to add on this topic?
I'll just say for podcasting in general, it's a channel that in my previous life I didn't spend a lot of time and work on. And I think we joked at the beginning of the call, I used to work at Bose, so I always kind of joke like I was overseeing probably the most endemic brand possible for podcasting, and we invested not a nickel in podcasting because it really lacked. At that time, we thought the scale and certainly like the tools necessary to effectively target and measure. And as I've gotten more into the podcasting world, and the reality is the media time spent, the consumption, the growth of podcasting in terms of listenership, and over the last 5-6 years, I mean, it's grown, like 5x. And the time spent is significant in terms of a percentage of time with media, but the time spent relative to the ad spend is way out of whack. It's basically right now podcasting is getting like 20 cents on the dollar for what it should be. So I really implore the broader advertising industry to really take a longer, hard look at podcasting, and not just because we have a tremendous technology and application that will help you grow your business through podcasting, which we will. Oh, by the way, but the fact of the matter is some of the biggest brands in podcasting are tried and true, direct response performance marketers who they only spend in channels that they know has a proven ROI, a proven ROAS. So the fact that they're spending in podcasting, and given like what a large channel it's been in terms of time spent, the bigger brands really need to start to think about, making a much greater investment in podcasting. It's kind of inherent that it's so underfunded compared to, what it does in terms of the levels of engagement, intention, time spent, and the fact that it works. Like I said, those performance marketers wouldn't keep spending in the channel if they didn't see the ROI.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. There's so much user-generated content that's becoming bigger and bigger. I think podcasting is growing significantly as far as the number of variety of podcasts out there, both live and recorded. And I think that there's just a massive growth opportunity in this space. And
I agree.
And we're just going to see more and more of it. I think it's kind of like when you think of like the growth of, something like TikTok as an example, where people are using short form video like that. I think that there's a huge opportunity for the growth of sort of a more interactive, long form live video or podcast that we haven't even like hit the tip of the iceberg of it yet.
Totally agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think as marketers, they're starting to realize now more, like you were saying too, it's like it seems so daunting in the beginning because it does seem like it's so hard to measure.
Yeah.
But I think more and more as it's becoming more mainstream, people are figuring it out. But like still, even your regular attribution software isn't going to pick up someone who listened to your podcast. So it does become a little bit harder to get funding for your podcast. So like, how would you speak to that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of where we're trying to make the ways of discovering podcasts and kind of doing like, lookalike long tail modeling from podcasts. We're really working to that end. I also believe kind of, there is alignment between brand suitability, brand responsibility, and performance attribution and ROI. The fact of the matter is like we take news, for example, right? Like the level of affluence and socioeconomic influence of people watching and listening to higher quality content like news. I mean, there's an absolute correlation. Data and research proves it out time and time again that those people are going to spend more and convert more. And I mean, I think that's, where I think podcasting is getting the short end of the stick is, it's a little behind, but catching up quite rapidly in terms of the tools and techniques, in terms of targeting, in terms of measurement, in terms of attribution. There's a lot of wonderful companies beyond just Seekr out there doing really great work, like Podscribe and Magellan and Claritas, and the list goes on and on. For those I forgot to mention, I apologize, but there's a great many of them. So I think just the bigger kind of Fortune 500, Madison Avenue type companies and agencies, they need to spend a little bit more time with the channel, and they'll see that it works.
Absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. Well, I guess we'll transition now into our final topic of the 4, which is what we ask all of our guests who come on. And that is, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
So I don't know if this is going to be all that interesting. I think, one of the great lessons I learned about 10, 12 years ago was an agency life and presenting to a very intimidating CEO of a very well-known brand. And my managing director at the time just told me, stop telling them how you built the watch, just tell them what time it is. So I'm very much about, how do we get into a dashboard ASAP? I'm really proud. So in terms of tech stacks, I will say when it comes to Seekr and our different applications, whether it's what we're doing in kind of content evaluation with Seekr Align, which is what we talked a lot about today, or if we're talking about more of what we're doing in generative AI with some of our generative products, as well as this new application we just announced this week called Seekr Flow. The UI is really intuitive. It's really polished. It's really smart, and it's very, very much point click, get what you need. So I like anything that kind of has that very simple, intuitive, interface and kind of dashboard type piece. So I'll say, Power BI has definitely become a huge friend of mine. We do a ton of work in HubSpot, which is really crucial in terms of everything we're doing in terms of our CRM. And then, we're, Slack has kind of become, particularly in the post-pandemic world, my best friend in terms of how to communicate with people when, oftentimes we are satellite and remote.
Yes. I saw David nodding, so I thought I'd just pass it over to him. We use Slack as well. I mean, it's just so easy not to. And it integrates with so many things so easily.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, on that, Pat, we have a little bit of time for maybe at least one post-topic question. So if you could go back to a time when you first came into, I don't know, we'll say the marketing industry, what is the number one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Well, I don't know if there's one piece of advice. I think find mentors first and foremost. And mentors can come in all shapes and sizes. But really put yourself into rooms, surround yourself with people that, do things or know how to do things that you don't, and are willing to, share, and you can learn from, whether it's, direct mentorship or indirect mentorship. So, but that's really like the trick to that isn't like just walking around and saying, hey, will you be my mentor? It's really having an eye for, and I always used to say, and I still carry this as me, it's like, what do I like? What am I good at? What do we need? And that kind of what do we need piece is like thinking about like, how do I apply my passions, my strengths, but then still be able to kind of learn and grow. So it's kind of like you have to be able to you always have to be able to add value, but kind of when you can add some level of value, you will, you will get back much more than you give. So, really finding kind of, where are their mentors, who can kind of provide, mentorship, and also, kind of what rooms should you need to get into to kind of get that level of mentorship, opportunity, experience. So it's really about being kind of, driven and self-motivating, but also knowing you're not going to be able to learn it all on your own. So you really have to surround yourself with, and put yourself in contact with people who can, teach you both indirectly and or directly, and just continue to set yourself up to kind of get yourself exposure and access and new and experiences.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of mentoring and being a mentor as well. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I should have said that, right? Like, give your time too. I think as we all get a little further along in our careers, karma is real. So the more that you provide and give to others, whether it's casual, informal, but just be willing. If someone asks you a question, someone reaches out, return the call, return the email, return the text. It goes a long way.
100%.
Yep.
Couldn't agree more. Giving creates the energy to receive.
Yes.
So going off this, are there any lessons you've learned along the way from past jobs or, your current role that you think everyone should know?
I think we're always learning and growing. I've had the great benefit of having, I think, a fairly versatile and diverse journey, working at large companies, small companies, agencies, brands, globally known companies, smaller, coming up startup companies, B2C, B2B. But the through line to that is I always learned something new. I always acquired a new set of skills, regardless of kind of how successful or unsuccessful the venture was. And I think, we're never too experienced, we're never too old to constantly be learning and growing.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yes. Be a lifelong student.
Exactly.
Yes. Great advice. Well, on that, and in closing, would you like to tell the listeners how they could find you if they wanted to reach out after the show?
Oh, absolutely. So first about Seekr, it's Seekr.com, Seekr. Again, anybody who's thinking about how do I apply AI effectively for my business, we should probably have a conversation. And I think most people are thinking about that if they're not already doing it themselves. So, you can reach out to me directly, on LinkedIn or on Twitter or X, whatever. Pat LaCroix, P-A-T, LaCroix, L-A-C-R-O-I-X. Happy to talk to anyone.
Awesome, Pat. Well, we thank you for joining us today. It's been a great show, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
David, Jesse, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. And real quick before we go, audience members, quick message for you. We invite you to get powered by BDEX. I'm going to put the QR code up on the screen. And if you're watching or listening to this on podcast later, you can simply go to bdex.com and click the Talk to an Expert button to get powered by BDEX. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI, which we're talking a lot about already today, but using it with your first party customer data to craft the audiences to actually, run campaigns that resonate with the people you want to be reaching out to. So just, imagine just like finding the audience. It's always the hardest part. and just having your customer data to be able to build a list is really going to help you hit the mark every time. So let's bring you closer to your marketing goals. We'll be eager to guide you. Just like I said, use this QR code or visit beadex.com and click talk to an expert. And for those curious about deconstructing data, as David mentioned, we've been talking about sponsorships. So we have our audience analytics all put together if you'd like to look at them and see if maybe you'd like to get your brand in front of our audience that we have right now on deconstructing data. And you can email us if you know anyone you might be interested in sharing to have as a guest on the show. Who would you like to hear? If not from yourself, just email us on both matters at info@beadex.com and share your qualitative data with us so we can make it better for you. And thanks again, Pat, for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Pat.